Good evening, members and officers of the Council and members of the press and public. I welcome you to this meeting of the Council. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. The proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend to film a meeting? Okay. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered, following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies have been received from Councillors Curran, Martin and Townend. Are there any other apologies?
Councillor Glenn Coleman-Cook.
Glenn Coleman-Cook, right. Thank you. Agenda item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of February 2018. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 8th of February 2018 be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Seconding, Madam Chairman.
Do members agree? Thank you. Announcements. I have not been informed of any announcements. Agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Dexter.
Yes, Madam Chairman. I wish to declare an interest in agenda item 6A, 6B, 6D and 7A, and it's because I'm a governor of the East Kent Hospitals Trust.
Right, thank you very much.
Those agenda items I will leave proceedings.
I think 7A is withdrawn, isn't it?
7A is withdrawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7A is withdrawn.
Yeah. Does he need to?
Yes.
Yeah. When those items are discussed. Sorry. Sorry.
Declarations of interest, Madam Chairman. I am also a member of the hospital governing body and trust, but I shall not be leaving the meeting, otherwise you won't get an answer to the question.
All right. So can't.
Members, if I can just give some advice about those two declarations of interest. whilst I understand why you've made those, clearly we aren't making a decision. It's not a decision-making part of the committee. Therefore, I don't think it's necessary for you to actually leave the meeting, Councillor Dexter or Councillor Wells.
Carry on.
Carry on. Agenda item 5, petitions. One petition has been received and one petition returns to Council in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 12. Agenda item 5A, petition regarding Broadstairs toilet refurbishment. An e-petition containing 69 valid signatures has been received by the Council. I am pleased to welcome Mr. Irving to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table? You have up to 3 minutes to speak. He's not here. Oh, right.
Like fools.
Right.
Maybe refer to Cabinet.
No.
Just say this bit.
Yeah. In accordance with the Council's petition scheme, the petition will be referred to Cabinet without debate for report to the Council within 3 ordinary meetings. Councillor Messenger. Councillor Messenger?
Thank you, Chairman. Just before it gets actually processed to the Cabinet, you might want to just correct the typo in 2.1, where it should say, I believe, 350,000, not 350.
Thank you. Agenda item 5.B, petition regarding Western Undercliff facilities. Report back to the Council. This item is to report back to the Council's response to the petition in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Would members please note the report? Thank you. Agenda item 6. Questions from the press and public. 4 questions have been received from members of the public in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 13. Please note that only the questioner and respondent are permitted to speak on the question, and that if the questioner is not present at this meeting, their question cannot be put but will be replied to in writing. Could the questioner please only state the name of the Cabinet member to whom their question is to be put, and read out the exact wording of the question that they submitted to the Council. Would members please refer to the supplementary agenda number 1. Agenda item 6A. Question number 1 from a member of the public, health service funding. I am pleased to welcome Dr. Gordon Nesbitt to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table?
This is a question for Councillor Wells. Does Councillor Wells back the plan to make savings of £457 million on health service funding for Kenton Medway as part of a sustainability and transformation plan that seems to disadvantage the already deprived people of Thanet?
I call upon the leader to respond.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Gordon Nesbitt. Speaking strictly, first of all, from the point of view of Thanet District Council, you'll appreciate this is not Thanet District Council's business as such. It is a matter for the NHS. Having said that, we already have a Cabinet Advisory Group specifically to deal with these issues, and the Sustainability and Transformation Plan was discussed initially at the meeting in December 2016 when the initial consultations began. Whilst it is widely acknowledged that savings are required to be made by the way that the NHS is being structured at the moment, we will always lobby to ensure that the local residents of Thanet are not disadvantaged by the changes that are made. Having said all of that, I would say from a personal point of view, and as it was addressed to me as Councillor Wells, rather than in a sense as Leader of the Council, we actually have a situation where we have a top-down transformation plan from a government to a county council, both of whom happen to be Conservative in nature, looking to actually make sure savings are made in order that you can earn some of that money back for being good boys and girls and making those savings. It's a rather bizarre way to go about things, and certainly it's causing some disruption and difficulty across other organisations across East Kent and in the hospital governing body itself.
Thank you. Agenda item 6B, question number 2 from a member of the public, QEQM Services. I am pleased to welcome Mrs Jeffries to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table?
This is a question for Councillor Wells. Will losing our emergency stroke unit at QEQM mean that we're more likely to lose our A&E as well as a result of the loss in co-adjacencies? Has the Council investigated this possibility in depth?
Thank you, Mrs Jeffrey. Call upon the Leader to respond.
Thank you for your question, Mrs Jeffrey. We are in the middle of a consultation on this particular topic, and I made reference in the last answer to the fact that we have a Cabinet Advisory Group who look at these topics in relation to what the impact on our residents of the changes that take place in the NHS, and I've requested that a response for the consultation on these proposals for the emergency stroke unit should be something the Cabinet Advisory Group considers at its next meeting. That said, if you look at the information that's come out from the hospital trusts and from the NHS units that are working on the Sustainability Transformation Plan, your question asks, are we more likely to lose our A&E as a result of the loss in co-adjacencies? And the answer to that would seem to be no, from the information that is available, because the decision on whether or not the A&E is here or at Canterbury or Ashford or wherever else is more related to the two options that are being considered in a consultation later on this year and early next year and how the three hospitals are going to be structured.
Thank you. Agenda item 6C, question number 3 from a member of the public, Manston Airport. I am pleased to welcome Mr Wright to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table?
My question is to the Leader of the Council, Mr Wells. Has TDC explored and exploited all avenues under its abilities in the exploitation of aviation use at Manston? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Wright. I call upon the Leader to respond.
Thank you for your question, Mr Wright, and there was I hoping for a peaceful evening. The situation really is pretty simple and straightforward, and I think it's often forgotten. The Council does not own the Manston Airport site, and as a result, its legal powers to secure aviation on that site are limited. The options are realistically to look at whether or not a compulsory purchase set of powers would be appropriate to achieve that aim, and to date, as we're all well aware, the Council has failed to identify or find a suitable indemnity partner to fund the purchase and operate the airport. The other options for that site being used for aviation relate to either direct sale and purchase between willing buyer and seller, and or something that's known as a development consent order, which we are promised is going to be happening very soon, I have to say, again. So those things are outside of the Council's powers, although there might be a consultee on them. Our powers relate to compulsory purchase, and for that we need an indemnity partner, and to date we haven't been able to identify one that has the funds and the willingness to do it.
Thank you. Agenda item 6D. Question number 4 from a member of the public. Health and Wellbeing Board and retention of local health services. I am pleased to welcome Mrs. Farrance to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table?
Good evening. Could I just point out that I'm not quite sure why I've been called Mrs. Farrance, because it should be Ms. Farrance. So I don't know where that came from. I'm not a Mrs. and I have no intention of being one. I've got a question for Councillor Wells. Given that Councillor Wells has not attended any of the bi-monthly Health and Wellbeing Board meetings since November 2015, of which he is one of just 2 TDC members, what is he doing to ensure that Thanet retains its 14 remaining GP practices, its A&E department and its stroke service?
Thank you, Ms. Farrance. I call upon the leader to respond.
Thank you for your question, Ms. Farrance. The situation, I think we've already touched on some of these answers in the previous 2. At the moment, Thanet has 14 GP practices. As most of you will be aware, the NHS's view of what a GP practice should do and look like is rather different to what perhaps most of us would remember, anticipate and expect. There are a variety of ways of running GP practices being trialled across Kent, 3 different versions or whatever. The most popular one, the one that seems to have most NHS support, is the Estuary View approach to life, which is tucked away, as you know, up and near Whitstable. Currently, Thanet GP practices are trying to support each other in little groups and clusters rather than moving over to a full Estuary View type approach. And that's something that has both the health and wellbeing and the CCG locally support. And they are co-located in the building, and the fact that we're not always at the public meetings doesn't mean that we're not talking to them constantly, because we are. And even then, the Cabinet member responsible for those areas, the Deputy Leader, Lynn Fairbrass, has been at all of those meetings representing our view. The A&E department is, as I say, subject to a decision from our hospital trust in terms of what it's going to do with its 3 particular sites and how and where A&E will be distributed across the East Kent district. And as we know, a lot of that critically depends on what happens with the strength and ability of the Canterbury campaign to actually overturn decisions made some 20 years ago about trying to make sure the services were near where people most needed them, rather than where it's convenient for the consultants who live in Canterbury to go to work. And the stroke service is subject to a current consultation, and as I've answered previously, we will be, as a Cabinet Advisory Group, asking them to actually formulate an appropriate response for us in this Council in the very near future.
Could I ask why you haven't attended the meetings?
Thank you. Questions from members of the Council. There are 2 questions from councillors, both of which have been withdrawn. Agenda item 8, motions on notice. No motions on notice have been received in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 3. Agenda item 9, Leaders' Report. Would members please note that this item has been withdrawn from the agenda. Agenda item 10, report of the Council of the overview, report of the Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel. I call upon Councillor David Saunders to present his report.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is very short and it hasn't been withdrawn. The Overview and Scrutiny Panel has met on 2 occasions. Well, perhaps it should have been. On 2 occasions since my last report, and the papers before you this evening detail the work of the subcommittees that are involved. And since its publication, the Community Safety Partnership subcommittee met on Tuesday of this week. And I have to say, as I've said in previous meetings, I wish that more members would look at the agendas to see what the subjects are, because at these subcommittees there are many, many agenda items which should be of interest to all members. On Tuesday we had an update from Kent Police regarding the impact of policing in parts of Ramsgate and Margate, which was very well received. And more importantly, and I know this affects all ward councillors, we had a presentation of the proposed new arrangements that we're making, and this thanks again from Trevor Kennett, excellent presentation, new arrangements that we're making with regards to tackle or attempt to tackle parents parking at schools and the inconvenient parking and inconsiderate parking that goes with that. Very well received, very good report. We're looking forward, I'm sure all members are looking forward to the implementation of this proposal. It will be very well received, and I'm sure it will relieve a lot of ward councillors from many, many phone calls that they receive with issues that they're unable to tackle because they come under a different authority. So very, very short report. Both in your papers and in my verbal dialogue, but I commend the report to councils, and I'm prepared to answer questions should you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Anybody got any questions? Councillor Johnson?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Saunders. I'm very grateful to Mr Kennett for the report, because I discussed some of it with him earlier in the day when we had another meeting. It's really important from a community safety point of view that it's not just parking that we address outside schools. Some members will be aware of difficulties, particularly with speeding cars, people jumping lights at St Gregory's School. I never miss an opportunity to raise this, because KCC and police and others will only specifically deal with things when there's a fatality, at least one. They probably like to have more so they can deal with problems, apparently. But it's really good that this council is tackling the parking side of it, but I hope that it's a joint community safety effort outside our schools, and quite particularly St Gregory's, that I've been dealing with really since I was the leader in 2014. And I raise it every time, and I don't seem to get very far with it, but this is a start, thank you. And it was also helpful to have somebody in a motorbike going around schools, but it's a major, major issue, and I raise it all the time. So I'm doing it tonight in front of all of you, so people don't forget when I'm long gone. Thank you.
Councillor Brim?
As Cabinet Member of Operational Services, I actually put it to the Director that it is within Thanet District Council's remit to actually put CCTV cameras outside schools, which would permanently deal with the issue. Running campaigns is okay, but it's a sticking plaster, and everything will go back to normal in a matter of time. Now, this is a priority. Children's lives are a priority. Safety is a priority. I've tried to ensure that outside our local secondary school with delivering £160,000 worth of puffing crossings. But outside these schools, it is a problem, and I feel at the schools where it is an issue and it's being raised and highlighted, we need to put permanent CCTV to be addressing the issue. Thank you.
Agenda item 11, Council Tax Resolution 2018-19. Would members please refer to the supplementary agenda number 27? Oh, sorry, number 2. It's a 2 and a question mark. It looks like a 7. Supplementary agenda number 2. I would advise that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6, I will call for a recorded vote on the motion or any amendments and substantive motions. I call upon Councillor Sturmish-Smertsing.
Thank you, Chairman. This report sets out the calculation of Thanet's council tax and proposes the increase to be effective for 2018-19. It includes reference to the preceptors listed in paragraph 1.3.8 and 1.3.9, whose precepts TDC collect along with its own council tax. Council approved the 2018-19 budget on the 8th of February, which assumed an increase of £6.57 for a Band D property. This represents an increase of 2.99%. I would like to draw members' attention to the relatively low increase in Thanet's council tax increase, as shown in paragraph 2.3. It is below the overall increase of 5.24%, and only Kent Fire and Rescue has a smaller increase than TDC. This report and its recommendations follow a structure as laid down in law, and it represents a statutory resolution. I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Is there a seconder? No. Okay. I instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Oh.
Sorry, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, thank you. In all of my time here, the leading group on council would make representations to government about the dire straits that this council might find itself in. Even when things weren't so bad, we would make an effort to let government know how difficult it was for us. And in recent years, it's been worse than ever. I think it's a 43% damage done to this council. So what representations has the leader or Councillor Townend or the relevant officers? I really do appreciate the hard work. I tell you this all the time, but I really do appreciate the hard work. But what representations were made to government? The government, obviously, a Conservative government. Thank you.
We take every opportunity to remind the higher tier authorities at the meetings when we deal with things like the business rates pooling, and then we deal with government ministers and DHCLG, I've got that right now, to actually point out that we are suffering, we are finding life extremely difficult. I have said over and over again in this chamber and outside, if you go back to the financial year 2012, we had an income in this council of somewhat in excess of £21.5 million, of which 11 million came from government funds. By 1920, we'll be living on an income of £16.5 million, all of which has to be raised locally. Government does know exactly what the situation is. It has probably cut local government harder than any other part of the public estate during the course of the years of what's become known as the years of austerity. They do know what the situation is, and we do tell them all the time, we do remind them, but they seem intent on this particular road and pushing us into ever more increasingly difficult financial decisions, many of which you will have seen and heard over recent years.
Thanks. So, Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Keith Coleman Cook. Councillor Connor. Councillor Constantine. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Not here. Oh, sorry. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dexter. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Evans. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Gregory. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hayton. Councillor Hillman. Councillor Howes. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Messenger. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Stuart Piper. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Pugh. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rozecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Stummer-Smertsing. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Venables. Councillor Wells. It's passed you.
The council tax resolution is passed. Thank you. Agenda item 12, standards hearing decision, Councillor Brem. I call upon the monitoring officer.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it is important they introduce the report and particularly explain what Council are being asked to do tonight and also what Council are not being asked to do. The report asks Council to consider a vote of censure in relation to Councillor Brim. A vote of censure is a formal expression of severe disapproval or a reprimand. This relates to Councillor Brim's use of social media in a way which compromised the integrity of an officer, and through that action, Councillor Brim brought her office and her council into disrepute. Tonight, the Council is not able to review or change the decision of the Standards Hearing Subcommittee, which has already decided that Councillor Brim has breached the Code of Conduct and Member Officer Protocol. Nor is Council able to change the sanctions imposed on Councillor Brim as a response to her breach of the Code of Conduct. Council is simply being asked to implement one of the 3 sanctions and agree a vote of censure. The breach of the Code of Conduct centres around Councillor Brim's post on her Facebook page. In that post, she said that a named officer needs to go and that the officer was not fit for purpose. It is a long-standing tradition in public service that a member should not raise in public matters relating to the conduct or capability of an officer. The Member Officer Protocol says that members should be aware that officers are constrained in the response that they may make to public comments from members. Members should not criticise officers personally, in public or through the press, nor seek to undermine their positions by abuse, rudeness or ridicule. When those comments came to light, Councillor Brim was immediately asked to remove them from Facebook, but she refused to do so. I should also add that Councillor Brim has recently repeated those comments in an email to all members. So, to recap, in terms of the Council's role today, Councillor Brim has been convicted and sentenced in respect to the breach of the Code of Conduct. The Council today is being asked to carry out part of that sentence by expressing their disapproval through a vote of censure. Thank you.
Thank you. Hang on, I'm not ready yet. Councillor Piper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wonder if I might ask Mr Howes, through your chair, please, for just one more piece of clarity. He's been kind enough to answer a number of emails for me this week. In the main paragraph, it says, "A censure is the issue of an unfavourable opinion or judgment or reprimand. Just for clarity, are those three things all the same thing with a different title, or are they three different forms of censure? And if they are three different forms of censure, could we have some guidance as to which one is intended to be used? Thank you, Chair.
No, what you're considering today is a form of censure, and those words that I mentioned earlier, the unfavourable opinion or judgment or reprimand, are merely a description to say you understand what the word censure means. So it means a form of reprimand or unfavourable opinion or judgment.
I propose that the Council censures Councillor Brim for her behaviour in using social media in a way which compromised the impartiality or integrity of an officer, and in bringing her office and the Council into disrepute. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
I second that, Madam Chairman.
Do members agree? Thank you. All those in favour? No, somebody said a show of hands.
Right.
Sorry, sorry. Can I ask? I think there was a suggestion that there ought to be a formal show of hands, in which case the Chairman's asked me to do that. So can please have a show of hands, all those in favour of the vote of censure, please?
The motion is passed. The censure is passed.
No, censure those who didn't vote.
No, it's fine. Carry on.
Carry on. No, those are the people who don't vote. Okay. No, thank you. Okay.
That concludes the business for the meeting of the Council.